Hey there, welcome to Do Stuff Outdoors. Today we're breaking out the kayaks and we're going to paddle about 6.5 miles down the Deep and Cape Fear rivers. Ready? Let's go. So the Deep River is about 125 miles long. It originates north and west of us in the Piedmont region of North Carolina, and then ultimately merges with the Haw River to form Cape Fear at Mermaid Point, which we'll be at in a couple of miles. What might be a little bit curious is that the term Deep River doesn't actually come from the depth of the water. It comes from the steepness of its banks. Now, you know, looking behind me, looking around me here, they don't look particularly steep. But in other regions, they're steeper. And that comes from an Indian word, probably a Siouan, Catawban origin, sapona or sapona. I'm gonna butcher these and I apologize. Sapona. Anyway, it could be a reference to the region or perhaps the people, the Saponi, who used to live in the vicinity. In 2007, the North Carolina General Assembly created what was called the Deep River State Trail. It's a hike and paddle trail, or it is supposed to be. As of yet, it's mid-2025 right now, not a whole lot of land has actually been acquired for that trail, although there are some regions around Jordan Lake and in Carbonton, up the river from us a ways here. Anyway, hopefully in the years to come, that trail, that route will become expanded. One of the neat things about the route that we're taking today is you can still see remnants of some of the power generation equipment and facilities that were used up until fairly recently. There were a lot more dams and locks on this river in the past. We'll talk more about that as we get closer to Mermaid Point, but there are fewer and fewer today, as the trend right now is to investigate removing those dams to restore the river. Well, that's a little disheartening. I thought that the camera that I've got mounted on the front of my kayak has been recording the route this whole time, but it does not have an SD card installed, so it's been recording nothing. So, oops. So I'm gonna try to just get this one set up a little bit, see if I can paddle around this and hope for the best, and that might work. All right, let's try this again. I had intended to get some nice B-roll or transitional footage of just us, there's four of us today, just paddling down the rivers, plural I guess, since we're gonna be merging with the Haw to meet the Cape Fear in, I don't know, a mile or two maybe. Well, less than 2 miles, because that's about the total distance between where we put in and where the rivers converge. Anyway, instead of that, there's just a little bit of me talking, and now hopefully we'll get some decent river footage if I stop talking, especially. Based on the reports that I looked at just before today, the river's cubic feet per second discharge rate was around 300, give or take, which is pretty good for an easy paddle. There is not much movement on the water at all. In fact, if you stop paddling, it can be hard to gauge whether you're moving or not. Just a couple of weeks ago, we'd gotten some rain, and so it had been up in the 2,000 to 3,000 cubic feet per second discharge rate. Gauge height was around 3 feet back then. It's around 1.7 today, I believe. I think that's true. Apparently there is a measuring station just about where we put in, so hopefully that's a pretty accurate reading. Anything under 200, they say, is the nicest walk you'll ever take with your kayak. So we're above that, so haven't had any issues with depth today so far, so hopefully that'll hold for the rest of the mileage we've got. As the sun's getting higher, the shadows on the sides of the closer to the bank are getting narrower, and there are quite a few floating logs or barely submerged logs that you got to watch out for. So I am kind of more toward the middle right now. Not really, still closer to the, I'm going to call it the Chatham side, but I think it's still all Chatham for right now. But even so, even in the middle, you got to watch out for barely submerged logs, or not so submerged logs, things like that. All right, so we've seen a few of these kind of pink lines scattered along the route we're taking, and one of them had a giant hook on it. This one has a hook and something on the end of it. So I don't know what we're gonna pull up here. Oh, holy crap. That scared the mess out of me. There's a catfish or something on this. All right, Zach is gonna hopefully pull this guy up. Maybe I can get a shot of him here. Right. Come in a little bit closer. Yeah, there he is. I think he's a catfish. Oh yeah, he's a cat. Yeah. Oh, and there he goes. All right, behind me, it's not much, but is a spot called Mermaid Point. This is the confluence of the Deep and Haw rivers. So we are technically at the head of the Cape Fear right now. That's what's downstream from us, where we'll be headed for the next 4-ish miles, give or take. But Mermaid Point Might be a curious name, seeing that we're relatively far inland from the ocean. Well, apparently back in the 1740s, 4 Scotsmen purchased land patents for the land around this area. Now at the time, before the Buckhorn Dam, which is below us, the water was lower. There was a long white sandbar back here, and a man named Ambrose Ramsay set up a tavern not too far upriver from here. And apparently people would walk up and down the sandbar on their way home from the tavern, and that's when they would notice mermaids just singing and laughing and splashing on this spit of land right here. And anytime somebody tried to approach them, they would, apparently they were shy, and they would jump back in the water or flap back in the water and swim away. It might be telling that people only seem to notice these mermaids on the way home from the tavern. And apparently back then, according to legend, the mermaids preferred to come inland away from the salt water of the ocean to wash their hair. Got to keep those tresses nice and shiny. It's possible that as additional locks and dams were added to the Deep and ultimately the Cape Fear rivers, the mermaid sightings ceased. The theory is that those locks and dams made it difficult for the mermaids to continue to make their way inland and upriver. That's probably it. Yeah. Ambrose's Tavern, or the Ramsay Tavern, it lasted into the 1900s, but it was likely destroyed during a flood that happened at some point between then and now. Records aren't entirely concrete about what the actual cause for that destruction was. So yeah, there's the Deep River that we just came down a couple of miles. There's Mermaid Point right in the middle. And then there is the Haw River that empties out of Jordan Lake before it gets to this region. This way is the Cape Fear. So that's where we're headed. Got about another 4 miles and change before we hit the Avents Ferry takeout. I had hoped to be able to get out of the kayak and explore the land around the point here, but there is really no good put in, so we're gonna keep going. Earlier I mentioned that there used to be quite a few locks and dams set up across the Deep and the Cape Fear rivers. Right now it kind of seems like the plan is to eliminate most of those, if not all of them. Maybe not all of them, but quite a few. For example, in 2005, the Carpenton Dam, which is north of where we started, that was removed. And like I said, I think the ultimate goal is to get the water levels of the Deep back to what they naturally would have been. You can still see remnants of some of these locks and dams, depending on what part of the river you're in, where you're paddling. And then below us, we won't get to it today, on the Cape Fear is the Buckhorn Dam. And that is still active as far as I'm aware. That is the one that caused the water around Mermaid Point to rise to a level where you can't still see that sandbar. So presumably, if the water were to return to, let's just say, 1740 levels, then it might be likely that the sandbar would still be there. And who knows, maybe the mermaids would come back. We are coming up on a trestle right in front of us here. I do not remember what it's called or what line runs over it. I'll put a note in the video. But if we can find a place to beach our kayaks, might try to get up and check it out a little more closely. I don't know if it's still active, so this may be a really dumb idea. Now, if you remember the trestle in the Onawa video, this is significantly shorter and lower. Almost directly in front of me is McKay Island. Now, it is one of two islands of any appreciable size in the Cape Fear between Mermaid Point and Wilmington, where it ultimately empties into the Atlantic. McKay Island is about 65 acres and it is about half a mile long. Other than that though, there's not a whole lot of information out there about this island. And even odder is in 1853, maps displayed it without a name, but the year prior, in 1852, it was known as Hawkins Island. That name likely pulled from either an early landowner or maybe an early survey. So there's really no concrete explanation for why it is now called McKay Island. That name didn't show up until around 1908. It's got places where apparently you can camp for the night. They're not official. They don't show up on any kind of federal or US maps or whatnot, but people do use it for that. Maybe if they're on a longer paddle, they might use it, or if they just want to spend the night in the woods, which I totally get that. So anyway, if we can find a place to beach, we might put in and see what we can see on McKay Island. The Cape Fear is kind of the dividing line between Lee and Chatham counties, and this portion of the Cape Fear puts us pretty squarely on the Chatham side. I think that all of McKay Island is considered Chatham County, but that might not be true. It may be down the middle, but I don't know. We are actually taking a short fork that, this being an island, it comes back around, so it's not much of a stretch. We are just about at the southern tip of McKay Island, and there really has not been a good place to try to put in. Things are very overgrown, so that might be something that's better attempted maybe in the fall or early spring before things have started growing again. So I don't think we're going to be able to check it out on foot. So we are less than a mile from Avents Ferry. That is going to be the takeout point for us today. But one of the, several interesting things about that location is it was originally likely used as an indigenous people's water crossing site, possibly the Sissipahaw, the Occaneechi, the Kiawe, and then in later years, starting around the 1700s, the Avents family, headed by Thomas Avents Sr., began operating a ferry, a water crossing at that location, or a ferry at that water crossing location. And into the later 1700s, 1781 in particular, General Nathaniel Greene, during the Revolutionary War, had engaged with Lord Cornwallis at Guilford Courthouse, north of here. And part of his methodology was using what are called Fabian tactics, similar to what Washington used, where rather than confronting a superior force numbers-wise directly, he would choose limited engagements focused more on general mischief, disrupting supply lines, and yes, decimating troops where possible. And so even though technically he retreated or lost at Guilford Courthouse, the Pyrrhic victory that Lord Cornwallis won, if you can call it that, put such a dent in his forces that as he followed Greene south toward this region, he ultimately decided that it wasn't worth continuing, and ultimately turned around and headed north again, and shortly after, Britain threw in the towel. There aren't concrete documents that say that Avents Ferry was the one true point where Greene and his troops crossed, but given the area, given the importance of Avents Ferry, it's likely that that's a good plausible candidate for that. Now in later years, it was helpful as Lee and Chatham counties and even nearby Wake County started to grow or continue to grow. So that is a curious bit of Revolutionary War history surrounding the Cape Fear, and particularly Avents Ferry. Okay, well, today's paddles carried us from mermaid legends past an unassuming island to a water crossing that helped shape early America. You know, there's a lot more that the Deep and the Cape Fear rivers have to offer. There's always a lot more to explore, but that is going to wrap it up for us today. So thanks for tagging along with us, and I'll see you next time out.